Sabrina Ionescu has always been a force to reckon with, a name that echoes fiercely in the basketball world. Her poise, intelligence on the court, and sheer ability to command a game have set her apart as one of the most compelling figures in the sport. But even legends have moments when they meet something, or someone, that leaves them utterly speechless. That moment came for Sabrina during a head-to-head encounter with Caitlin Clark, whose jaw-dropping skills and unrelenting swagger left the usually composed Ionescu wide-eyed and stunned. But before we proceed further, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. This wasn't your average basketball game, not by a long shot. From the opening tip-off, it was clear that Clark was not only prepared to compete, but to dominate in a way that bordered on theatrical. The moment she touched the ball, you could feel the energy shift. Clark's control over the game was immediate and electrifying. She launched into a series of plays so daring they seemed almost reckless, until they worked flawlessly again and again. Her no-look passes sliced through defenders like a hot knife through butter. Her pull-up threes, some from merely half-court, defied logic and perhaps even gravity. It wasn't long before Ionescu, sitting courtside with the sharp gaze of someone who knows the game better than most, began to react. At first, it was subtle, a raised eyebrow, a slight tilt of the head. But as Clark continued her onslaught, threading passes that made defenders look like extras in her highlight reel, Sabrina's reaction shifted. Her hands moved to her face in mock disbelief, and at one point, she simply shook her head and laughed. It wasn't the laugh of someone amused by a fluke. It was the laugh of someone who knew she was witnessing greatness. Caitlin Clark's game is built on audacity and precision. She doesn't hesitate. If there's a half-second window to make a play, she seizes it like it was left open just for her. That kind of confidence is infectious, but it also catches opponents off guard. Defenders chasing her down the court often look like they're stuck in quicksand, while Clark glides through spaces they didn't even see coming. Sabrina, who has made a career out of dissecting defenses and capitalizing on chaos, seemed genuinely taken aback by Clark's ability to manipulate time and space. The moment that left Sabrina truly speechless, though, was a sequence that felt more like a choreographed dance than a basketball play. Clark sprinted down the court, her defender glued to her side. Without breaking stride, she lobbed a behind-the-back pass to a teammate who wasn't even looking in her direction yet. The ball landed perfectly in stride, leading to an uncontested layup. Sabrina didn't just gape. She leaned back in her seat, hands on her head, a picture of utter disbelief. It was as if she was recalibrating her understanding of what was possible on the court. This wasn't just about raw skill. It was about style, too. Clark's charisma on the court is undeniable. She plays with an edge, a visible joy that borders on taunting but never quite crosses the line. After draining yet another three-pointer from what might as well have been the parking lot, she turned to the crowd, a silly grin on her face, and gave a quick shrug, as if to say, "What else did you expect?" Sabrina caught that too, smirking in response. It was a small moment, but it felt like a passing of the torch, or at least an acknowledgement of a shared mindset. For Ionescu, who has always prided herself on her ability to stay a step ahead, seeing someone execute with such unrelenting creativity and precision had to be humbling. She wasn't just watching a player dominate a game. She was watching someone rewrite the rules of engagement, and yet there was no sense of bitterness or rivalry in her reactions. Instead, there was a kind of admiration and even joy. Clark's performance wasn't just a spectacle. It was a lesson in the art of basketball. She reminded everyone, including Sabrina, that the game isn't just about stats or mechanics. It's about feel, about instinct. It's about knowing when to break convention and trust that you can make the impossible look effortless. And for someone like Sabrina, who has built her career on doing just that, it was probably a little exhilarating to see it from the other side. As the game wore on, Clark continued her rampage, racking up points and assists in numbers that would seem ridiculous if they weren't real. The crowd was fully in her corner by the fourth quarter, roaring with every bucket and gasping with every no-look pass. It was the kind of performance that people would tell stories about, the kind that gets replayed in highlight reels for years. And Sabrina, seated there as both a fan and a peer, was living through it in real time. By the final buzzer, it wasn't just Sabrina who had been rendered speechless. The entire arena seemed to share her awe, a collective sense that they had just witnessed something extraordinary. As the players walked off the court, Clark flashed a quick smile in Sabrina's direction, a moment of recognition between two basketball minds who clearly understood each other. Sabrina, for her part, returned the gesture with a knowing nod, her face still carrying traces of disbelief. It's rare for athletes at Sabrina's level to be surprised. They've seen it all, lived it all, and done most of it themselves. But every so often, someone like Caitlin Clark comes along and shifts the landscape, even for the greats. Watching Sabrina's reaction was a reminder that no matter how skilled or experienced you are, there's always something, or someone, that can reignite your sense of wonder. Clark didn't just put on a show. She challenged what people thought was possible, and in doing so, left one of basketball's brightest stars momentarily at a loss for words. As Sabrina walked out of the arena later that night, there was no doubt she had just seen the future of basketball unfold before her eyes. Clark's performance wasn't just impressive, it was a statement. And for Sabrina, who has always been a student of the game, it was the kind of lesson you never forget. Even after the game, Sabrina Ionescu's reaction lingered in the minds of fans and analysts alike. Her stunned expressions, the hands-on-head disbelief, and that knowing smirk became the talk of the basketball community. It wasn't just about Caitlin Clark's performance. It was about how someone as composed and accomplished as Ionescu had been so visibly moved by it. For anyone who understands the competitive spirit of elite athletes, this was no small thing. Sabrina's reactions weren't just admiration. They were a genuine acknowledgement that something extraordinary had unfolded before her eyes. As she left the arena, Sabrina was likely replaying those moments in her head, dissecting the brilliance she had just witnessed. For someone who prides herself on her basketball IQ, this wasn't just about being entertained, it was about learning. What had Clark done differently? How had she created opportunities out of seemingly impossible situations? For Sabrina, these weren't just questions to ponder. They were fuel for her own growth as a player. The ripple effects of Clark's performance would undoubtedly extend far beyond that single game. Young players watching from their living rooms, gymnasiums, or phones were inspired. Coaches were already scribbling notes, trying to figure out how to emulate or counteract what they'd seen. And somewhere, future opponents of Caitlin Clark were preparing for the inevitable headache she'd bring to their defenses. The game had not only showcased Clark's individual brilliance, but it also raised the bar for everyone else. For Sabrina, it may have been a bittersweet moment. Seeing the next generation push boundaries is thrilling, but it also serves as a reminder that the game is always evolving. And yet, if her visible joy during Clark's performance was any indication, she wouldn't have it any other way. Basketball, at its core, is about pushing limits, redefining the possible, and inspiring the next wave of greatness. On that night, Caitlin Clark did all of those things, and she left Sabrina Ionescu, a player who has done the same for so many others, absolutely speechless. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more engaging content. We thrive on your feedback, so be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Until next time, keep discovering and stay tuned.